I think data debt first, where is the debt for your data? Like what are you not getting that you wanted? Or is it buried someplace that you didn't even have a chance to look at all the stuff was there to see if you could have taken it in a different direction? So sometimes it's this like little hidden gems that are within the data, but it's overlooked because that's not where the bulk of the patterns came from. And so I think, when we're looking at data debt, it is, maybe there's not the data debt, or if there is, what input am I giving it so it can decrease the amount of data debt that we're getting? So I think a lot of it is, what is the input? Asking just the right question or giving it just enough information that changes the trajectory of what that data is.
Welcome to Podcast Wise, Perspectives, Cybersecurity, and AI. In the high-stakes world of cybersecurity, AI, and healthcare, the challenge for the C-suite isn't just adopting technology. It's ensuring that innovation doesn't outpace the human structures that hold an organization together. In this episode of Podcast Wise, we are joined by Holly Henneman, a strategic education leader and the architect of the human-eyed AI lens. With a career that spans language arts, patient advocacy, and institutional growth, Holly provides a masterclass on navigating the governance paradox, how to implement rigorous AI oversight without stifling the creative autonomy of your best talent. We dive into a pragmatic roadmap for leaders who need to move with urgency while protecting the foundational trust of their stakeholders. From the hidden liabilities of data debt to the essential role of the human in the loop in clinical settings, Holly shares why the next 5 years of leadership will be defined by systems thinking and human behavior, not just technical knowledge. All right, let's get started. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Hey, Holly.
Hello,
How are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. Thank you for
Good.
asking. So, all right, we're just going to jump right in. So,
Okay.
Holly, you spend your days helping organizations navigate the complexities of AI and human potential. To start us off, what is one piece of technology, AI or otherwise, that you personally found that you can go without this morning before you even reached your desk?
A piece that I could go without before I even reach my desk. I think, well, I think in my morning I can go without like a chat GPT. I can go without that type of like AI technology. I definitely need my Google Maps getting to work though. I can tell you that, especially on a day like today. We had a storm that came in on my way to work and there was traffic everywhere. What's normally a 20-minute commute was 55 minutes. So, but
Oh,
I like to in the morning reflect and get where my mind's at without being influenced by outside
okay.
social media or AI or anything like that.
Okay. So you're more of like maybe like a journal or something like that?
Yep. I have a few different meditations I start every day with and end them with every night. And it just kind of gives me that loop of how my day went and figure out what my plan is for the next day.
That's awesome. All right. So many organizations are moving quickly with AI. Where do you see leaders unintentionally creating governance gaps? Not
It's
because, so not because they are careless, but because growth is outpacing structure.
Absolutely. And so I think when that happens with anything, when things start to move too fast, we try to slow them down, or we get so caught up just kind of going with the flow, trying to figure out what our next move is. So the governance gaps comes in, well, do I want to overgovern? And then if I do that, then that takes away some of the creativity that comes along with things. But if I undergovern, then I'm putting things up for risk. So it gives more people maybe unintentionally to make choices or use some sort of AI that may do more harm than good, or they met it with the best intentions and then it took it to the next level to see what it could do. I see that a lot in education. They're very, because of all the guidelines that we have, there are great programs out there and I want somebody dabbling in it, but I also have to be careful to be like, okay, we're going to do this building wide now. So I think that governance gap is you're getting so much information and you have to go back to what your fundamental purpose is, to what are we doing with the information. So who's safeguarding it, I think, is where a gap comes in,
Mm,
and what is the outcome that we actually want.
okay.
So, just letting things go and see what we can come up with, or if there's an end goal, we need to know what our end goal is. And then if new things come of that, great. That's how we have so many inventions that were created by mistake. That wasn't the original goal. It
Right.
happened. And now let's keep that to the table. What is our original goal? And then we'll go back to the other stuff.
Okay. So we hear responsible AI everywhere. What
Yeah.
does that actually look like inside a real organization on a normal workday? What shifts in how teams meet, decide, escalate, and document?
For sure. I think documentation is key regardless of how you're doing it and what formality. But I think documenting the thought process along the way, what has been created, and then reflection. So, we have kind of like the enduring understanding. We do a backwards design. We know what our end goal is.
Hmm.
But then how do we structure our day to get to that goal? How do we communicate that with others? And then to know that what we've given gets that right feedback that we've met our end goal. So I think that's something that's extremely important. The other thing is being open about what we're using as our tools. I think there's also part of that intellectual property. And if I've created it and I said it and I didn't use I think that's important to know too.
Hmm.
But if I'm using AI as a tool, then I think it's also being very transparent about, okay, yes, I was thinking about this. I threw it into AI because I don't think it's too much different than collaborating at a think tank, trying to put all our ideas out there. I just think that knowing where those ideas came from to give attribution where attribution should go, I think that's part of what needs to happen in our day to day because it just helps establish that trust. I think that if you want to have psychological safety and trust, then you need to make sure you're sharing what information and where it came from when it's appropriate.
Yeah, that makes sense. And also, like, I think in the news right now, there's this thing
Mhm,
where there was an AI movie that was
mhm,
out. And I
right.
think either AMC or Regal pulled it out because for some reason I didn't read the article, but the
Yeah,
headline was like, big movie theater pulled out the AI movie. So there's a lot of also in the creative side that is somewhat. People are like, I don't know, or, like the hesitance in the AI tool being used to make
right.
movies. It's
Yeah, well, they've
something
done that with
interesting.
songs too and poems and all of these things that we like is what was AI generated and then what was, somebody sitting down with a pen and paper. But I think also if it's AI generated, I think it's really important to know what input it was given before it was created because there's creativity in that as well. Like for example, I think I said to you before, I'm not a graphic designer and I can't draw for much of anything, but I can have AI help me to generate an image of what I'm thinking of, and I can manipulate it more rather than annoying somebody who's a great artist, like a sketch artist going, okay, no, no, now do this, now erase this, now go there. So I think both have value, but I do think it's what you're feeding it as well. Because I would be curious to see somebody who creates an original work putting it into AI and seeing which direction it goes and where they want to take ownership. But I think if we're doing things responsibly, that's that whole human eyes thing, human eyes to AI. Is
Hmm.
this what my intent was? I've also had the picture where it gives me three arms. That's not my intent. My intent was to do something silly, or something serious. And I don't want the third arm.
Yeah, that's funny. I also like I've previously said, AI is not going to replace the human. Is more like an enhancement. Is more of something to augment,
Right.
right?
Right.
Because like earlier today, I used AI to help me with copy because
Mhm.
I'm not a good writer. I'm
Right.
not. Like I'm gonna
Mhm.
be honest here. I'm not a good writer. So I have, my idea that what I want to write, and then I'm saying, hey, Gemini, can you help me polish it up? And then
Right.
it does. And I'm like, yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Then send it
Yep.
off. Right.
Well,
So,
and I'm a language arts teacher. That's how I started. That was my first trade or my first career. And so I was never a strong writer because I thought strong writing was because I had to have things grammatically correct. My
mm,
ideas were there, and my best teachers encouraged me to share my ideas. They would help me edit what I needed. And so I think sometimes when we look at AI, even when I use it now as another check to make sure that, okay, do I have my comma in the right spot? Do I have but then it throws things at you like emojis and icons and dashes. And I'm like, that's not what I want. So I think there's different types of AI that helps us. Is it something that is like the large language models it's like me giving something to copy edit? Is it something that we're sharing ideas back and forth and it gives me another suggestion? Or am I just doing the automated AI in which I don't even know what's being spit out? So I think AI as a tool, it depends on what we're using it as that tool. Is it doing
mm.
the job for us? Is it helping us just polish off what we've already done? Or are we doing some sort of collaboration with the AI to generate new ideas or to improve performance?
Yeah, totally agree. So in industries like healthcare and financial
Mhm.
services, trust is foundational. How do executive teams move with urgency while still protecting judgment and human oversight?
I think it's kind of like, wait that 10 minutes before you speak or don't send that email yet. I
Mm,
think we have a lot of information that comes at us pretty quickly. And I know that, a lot of times with our finances and with healthcare, we want urgent answers. But I think it does need to be discussed, or again, that's going to be that outcome. And you have to know what your audience is. Some people are just going to want the numbers, give me the numbers, I'll figure it out on my own. But and it also depends. Am I just saying, oh, your portfolio looks great, I've got all this data, this is the next trend, here's where you're going to invest? People like that, right? But when
mhm.
we take the downturn, you better have a human voice behind that saying, okay, look, we've run the numbers, we've seen the data trends, and your portfolio is not going to look too good for the next 6 months based upon all trends. That needs to have that human voice behind it. And I found the same thing. I worked at a pretty major hospital here in the Columbus area as a patient advocate, and we had plenty of data. There's plenty of data out there, but you need to have that human component to help explain that to somebody. And so I see that with finances too. Taxes are one of my least favorite things to do, not because I don't know the numbers. It's all the little legal jargon that goes with it that
Yeah.
throws me for a loop. And the same thing when I look at, I go get blood work and it gives me 15 different things and then I have to break down what it does or when I'm going to get a prescription. So I think you need to have that before you send it out there. You need to know who your audience is or who the person you're with so they understand it. We can't throw a lot of acronyms at somebody if they're not in the industry. And when you're dealing with
Yeah.
something that people care deeply about, like their health or somebody else's health and their finances, you really have to slow down. And even though you might know the answer, just taking it a beat before you can deliver that and then figure out what the next steps are. So
Yeah.
just because it can be automated and it can go fast, sometimes that's not necessary. Now, when it's a life or death situation, or if we don't make this move now, that it could have a very detrimental effect, I think there's a time for urgency. But, like I just look at my job when I'm working with students and I get called to maybe there's a fight or some sort of escalation. I was always taught, run to it, but walk in slowly. So I can get there fast, but I don't know what I'm walking into,
Mm,
like that kind of thing. So I can still help, but it's the same thing. Run to it, get all the information. But once you get there, you have to assess the situation and then move slowly. And then you can figure out how quick you need to move from there.
yeah. I mean, like, I think also with the patient data and finance, a lot of the people that you talk to, a lot of the people that we communicate with for like their labs or even the
Uh,
financial statements, some of them don't understand what, glucose A/B and
yeah,
what does it do, right?
right.
So me myself, I'm like, I know that if if it hits a certain number, I would
Uh,
be diabetic, right? Or
right.
something like that. Then,
Yeah,
but the normal population don't, right? It's
right.
not like something that is taught to you at school and then it's something that it's like that you are constantly in your face kind of
Right.
number that's like, make sure that you are at so that you're not diabetic for
Yeah.
your glucose monitoring, right? So that's something also like that you don't there's some data that day to day you're not gonna think about.
Right. Well, and I like to know, I'm not just the numbers person. I want to know, okay, so here's glucose. This is what it does in your body. How does one get glucose into their body? So,
Uh-huh.
for example, use the diabetic example and diabetes runs in my family. So I'm going to know what foods that I should be providing and all those things. So the number is the number. That's my gauge. But I'm more interested in the behavior that
Mm,
can either raise or change that number. And so the data needs to be there. But again, some people are like, "Oh, no, it's fine. It's at whatever number, it's at 62 and that's fine, or it's at 75 and that's just fine because I just had my lunch." But for a diabetic, that's not going to be the same thing.
mhm.
And so I think there's got to be, again, that thing is what does it do in your body? What is the thing that's happening within your DNA that's not making glucose work for you or against you, and what can you do to fix that?
Yeah. Here we are talking like we know.
Yeah, yeah, but because we talk about the numbers, right? And you're like, "That's a good number, that's a bad number." I mean, I go in and I've got my cholesterol's high, but don't worry about it, Holly, because the good cholesterol is really high and your bad cholesterol is really low. But if I look at that end number, my cholesterol's high, you
Right.
know?
And then you're like, so which one is it? Is it good or is
Yeah,
it bad?
yeah, yeah,
Okay. So now, over the next 5 years, what will separate leaders who navigate AI well from those who struggle? Is it a technical knowledge, some thinking, humility, or something deeper?
I don't think it's going to be the technical knowledge. Think that we technology we can teach. We may not understand it, but there's somebody who's out there doing it. I think
Hmm.
it's the system. I like to think that I operate in culture and systems, right? Because you have some sort of whatever the background you're bringing to based upon whatever system in any organization that you go to. And I think that those who can maintain the behavior focus and how does a human behave in technology, or how does a human behave in different situations, or how do I teach, or how can I get them to learn or be motivated? But you've got to have that psychological safety part too. If you don't understand human behavior, you're not going to be a successful leader. And it doesn't mean you have to be a guru at it, but you have to understand or get somebody who is going to be a support for you that understands human behavior.
Uh-huh.
Just to be able to be like, "Hey, probably shouldn't have said that," or, "You know what? You can tell them that they have to use this form," right? So we do forms and policies, and we give all these things out, and then there's who's gonna govern it, who's gonna safeguard it, and if I don't understand when I put a policy what it's going to do to somebody, then that's going to be a problem. Like, for example, and I'll use it, I know I'm going back to the schools, but cell phones in schools, don't have them, do have them. And so, our government said we don't want them having the cell phones in schools during educational time. Great, got a policy. I got the paper. But the reality is, who has to enforce it? I'm the person who has to enforce that. So when I go in, I'm not just going to snatch up somebody's phone. There's got to be a purpose behind while they're using it when they shouldn't be using it. So I think that's part. If I went in just by policy and just started taking things left and right, not only is that going to damage trust
Mm.
or anything else that I need, but there might be a reason why. Or it could be they're just not interested in the lesson and want to listen to music. So I think there's that steps of why, because the adults in the room, I guarantee all of them have a cell phone on them. So I think that's the
Exactly.
part too is what's the why and what's the what do we need, what do we want, what do we know? And what's the outcome that we want?
Yeah. And also in school policies, like the phone policy, I believe it's good for the kids to have it, but turn it off,
Yeah.
right? Have it off. Or I've seen kids some school have that pouch.
Hmm. Yeah.
So I don't know how that works out. How is it at your school? Like, do you guys have it like there's no cell phones whatsoever? Or is it
They
like,
have them, and then the teacher just will often ask, "Hey, I need you to put that away." Most of the time they do. If not, "Can you put it on the desk?" And then they'll call for me. But part of me is the conversation that I have with them when it gets to the point that I have to intercede. And
mm,
so my sister, she's in education as well. She always likes to say that the one who's doing the listening is the one that's doing the learning. Right. And then I communicate back to you the show I've learned. And so I have that conversation with him. If you are listening to something else that's not the instruction that's coming for you, then you're not learning something. And then they might have, well, it gives me coping mechanisms or it gives me comfort. Okay, but it can't interfere with the instruction that's coming there. So you're going
mm,
to miss something important. If you've got your earbuds in and I'm calling a fire drill, or there's something that just happened outside the classroom, or we need to get your attention to say, hey, watch out for that, whatever, you can't hear it, which is, riding a bike. I don't put two earbuds in my ears when I'm riding a bike. I want to have one ear that can listen to the stuff that's around me. I think that's also a safety factor. And so we talk about that with being safety as well.
it's interesting. Now, if you were advising a boardroom tomorrow,
Mhm.
what is one AI related question they should be asking leadership that is not being asked often enough?
And I'm not certain if it's being asked often or not. I would want to know who is overseeing what AI we're using. So, and what AI are we using and for what purpose?
Okay.
So, to make sure if I'm in a boardroom, I want to know that there's oversight and I want to know what we're using and I want to know the outcome of why we're choosing that. I don't think any of that takes autonomy away from anybody to explore new things. But when we aren't asking those questions, that's when you can sometimes get your one off who's using your company data to maybe they're doing something on their own and it might be something where I'm doing a report, I have to do reports and behavior reports all day long. So if I'm writing on a piece of paper, I own the data. It's right here. If the paper gets swiped off my desk, I know where it went, right? or, I know that that came from my desk. If I'm putting that information into AI because I want to make sure the report's correct or I want to check all of those things, am I using a student name? Am I using stuff that would be identifiable that if it were to get into the wrong hands, where's that going to go? I mean, there's a reason why we still have doctor's office that are asking us to send faxes when we could so much easier
Just
send an
email it.
email, but
Yeah.
they don't. They want a fax. And I've not understood that, but I've seen that in healthcare over and over again. Well, we can't send it in an email, but we will send it if you fax it to us. But yet my financial institution will give me a cryptic email with a code and I can do it. So I just haven't ever wrapped my head around those as well. So I think is who's in charge of the information? What are we using the information for? And then what outcome do we want? I think those three things you would definitely need to if I were having a board, that's what I would want to know.
And it's funny enough that both healthcare and finance, they both have our name, phone number,
Hmm.
address, date of birth,
Hmm.
SSN,
Yeah.
you know. The only difference is like medical insurance. One doesn't have versus the other. And one is able to do a cryptic email,
Right.
encrypted email versus what is like send me a fax. So
Right.
that's funny to see the difference on the industry.
Right, right. And then if you're sending the fax, who's in charge of the fax? Who's the one who's pulling it off the machine? So there's all of that. That's there. That there's still, I mean, there's going to be a breach. You're still going by human behavior. Is it being
Uh-huh.
used for good, or did it fall even behind the machine? And you didn't bother to look far enough. But
Right.
yeah,
Also, if it's left there on the machine overnight, is the cleaning crew coming to
right,
swipe it, right? So, like, there's all kinds of pros and cons on either
right.
side. So, with the accessibility of consumer LLMs, many employees are using AI outside of official channels.
Mhm.
How should a C suite approach the balance between encouraging grassroots innovation
Mhm.
and mitigating shadow AI security risks?
I think it goes back to, our HEPA, FERPA, all the different things that we have. Are you providing an outside source, personally identifiable information for something else? And it depends because a lot of it depends on how the AI is built too. If it's something that's just in-house or just something that's on your computer and that's, you're not using the large language model, which it starts to pull information and trends and patterns from everything when it gets spitting out an answer for you. But if
Uh-huh.
it's something like, oh, no, this is just within house, it's only for this program. And, we know the language, we know the data that's there. There is definitely, I would guard against using anything that would be personally identifiable. But it's no different if I bring my personal laptop to work to get on work email and I've got my personal things on there, or I'm using my personal cell phone to make
Uh-huh.
work calls. There's a lot of overlap in any of that. But the thing, like within my jobs and my careers, both with healthcare and education, and pretty much anything, is when I'm on the company's time, I'm supposed to be doing company things, but there is overlap. But if I don't have that overlap, it's also going to reduce my productivity. If I had to only go to the work computer and only sit at the desktop to do whatever it is I was going to do, I'd get far less done than I can if I can use the tools that I have at hand. And when I'm trying to expedite, because I don't want to spend a lot of time doing behavior reports anymore, I'd rather be talking with the individual who is
Uh-huh.
having the behavior, or I'll be talking with the person who's undergoing a crisis or, experiencing some sort of medical thing. That's where I want to invest my time. I don't want to spend a lot of time in the reporting. So I can see or want and desire to be able to use some sort of AI to do that. But you also have to make sure that you are double checking what's there. I don't know if you've ever watched The Pit, but they were trying to implement an AI program for the medical drama on HBO. They're
Mm.
trying to implement an AI program to do their data, their reports.
There are
And
notes.
yeah, their notes. And so part of it, she was dictating it, but it would say the wrong word. It would be because a lot of science words or those types of medical things, AI, unless it's been built to do that and it has learned your language, it's going to do a lot of misfires before it gets to the right thing. So it
Uh-huh.
takes somebody else to, am I talking
Train it.
glaucoma or glucose? Because it might spit out one of the others because type something wrong into chat GPT and see how closely it gets the right word that you're looking for. It figures out your patterns and recognitions too. So I think that's going to be something that's really important is if they are doing so, I think one, they should be reporting what they're using and I'll be like, okay, yeah, no, I had AI put out this report for me and this is the platform I'm using too. Because if you're using, I mean, you're going to get a different result if you use something like Perplexity than you're going to get from, Gemini or ChatGPT because of the way that they're built.
Hmm, that's interesting. Now, beyond just upskilling,
Mhm.
how should a chief people officer or CEO rethink the very structure of their teams when 30% of routine cognitive tasks can be offloaded to an ingent
Yeah. And I think that that's when it comes to your strength and weaknesses of who you have. I don't know. I mean, there are some people who genuinely enjoy doing reporting and data, and that's fine. But
Uh-huh.
there's also going to be that one next step. So maybe they're running in the report, and maybe that person is the one who's just going to look at it for accuracy. The other people who are doing that are probably using it to take part of the administrivia part out of what they don't like about their jobs. So it allows them time to do something else, to be more
Yeah.
creative. And I think once again, when we start to take away from people's ability to do what they enjoy or what they want to create, that's when people get really upset about governance too. They don't want their autonomy taken away. They want autonomy to be able to do something. Or if they can get it done faster, maybe they're going to have better work-life balance instead of being at home filling out all those reports again. So maybe your 14-hour workday comes down to a 12-hour workday or, something like that. What you can do automatic, that would be great. And so I think those are the conversations that I would want to be having with people is let's figure out what's your purpose? What's your why? What's your strengths and your weaknesses? And talking to the people, knowing that it is like there are several things that we don't even know could be automated right now. But what is the human component that you bring to the table that we can emphasize?
Uh,
I see that Daniel Pink a while back did something on motivation, and he was showing it. I think he even used Wikipedia as an example. These people who aren't getting paid to research information and put it up on this thing. And I remember a kid, I was probably one of the worst students. I was never doing my homework and I didn't want to do that stuff, but I would go home and I'm that old to read the encyclopedia because I wanted to learn about everything that I possibly could. I didn't want to follow the system that was given to me because it took away from my ability to create. So I would
uh,
do the average amount of what I needed to do to keep my parents off my back, keep my teachers happy. But I was learning so much more on my own than I was in that I needed the structure of the classroom and there are things that I learned, but so much that I could learn outside of that, which is how, I mean, there's jobs that the jobs that don't exist yet, but without a kid or without an adult having that ability to go explore something new, we stifle that creativity and progress, in my opinion.
yeah, I totally agree with that because here's the thing is that if we take the creativity out, we just become robots.
Right, right,
Right? We just become robots where, it's no longer human factor, it's more
right,
of robot factor. Is
right.
we're no longer putting the human side in whatever task we're doing.
And look at even what you did do with automation and in the tools that we've developed. You still have to have, we've got cars that come on an assembly line and send us something, but we still have the humans there that are checking, whatever their how many point inspection, pulling on door handles, doing those things because a machine will mess up too, and if it doesn't have that human overlook to it, then
Uh-huh.
there's still a need for that, but maybe it all changes depending on what industry too.
Yeah, I like to call it the human in the loop.
Yeah, 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 absolutely.
So we often talk about the model, but the output is only as good as the data. What are the hidden liabilities in data debt that most companies are ignoring in their rush to deploy?
Think it's what is that's a great question, and there's a couple different avenues I can take while answering it. I think data debt first. Where is the debt for your data? Like, what are you not getting that you wanted, or is it buried someplace that you didn't even have a chance to look at all the stuff was there to see if you could have taken it in a different direction? So sometimes it's this like little hidden gems that are within the data, but it's overlooked because that's not where the bulk of the patterns came from. And so I think when we're looking at data debt, it is, maybe there's not the data debt, or if there is, what input am I giving it so it can decrease the amount of data that we're getting. So I think a lot of it is what is the input? Asking just the right question or giving it just enough information that changes the trajectory of what that data is. So what you might ask on the same thing, I'm going to ask it probably in a different way, and hopefully we come up with something along the way. So I think sometimes, I mean, input has to equal output, or output has to equal input. It's got to go someplace. So where is the misfire? And so I think that's true. I think that's when you have to go back to, okay, what was said, what were we looking for? Because is it really a data debt, or where did that data go, or where is that key? Because it went someplace. So
Hmm.
where did it go?
Yeah. And it's also like if you think about it, when you, let's say, you work in a document and you have like, instead of letting it say, so back in the day when there's like version one, version 1.1,
Yeah.
1.2,
Right.
2.0, 2.2, whatever, imagine you have all of those files, right? And then you ask Copilot, let's say you're in Microsoft, you ask
Yeah.
Copilot to do an analysis of your documentation, and or you ask a question, but they all come from this different versions. So which one is true?
Right. Well, and that's, I mean, a game changer for me is when you were able to look back at the history of what you kind of document. Okay, what version do you want to restore? And it's
Hmm.
never, no matter how far you go back, it gives you everything you want. It's because sometimes you have to sacrifice what you created to go back to the old version, but they all exist someplace. And I think it's not that much different than playing the game telephone, right? Like the
Yeah.
message was delivered, and now what is the outcome? Where did that data that come from? Who got it
Hmm.
wrong along the way? And so
Yeah.
what version do we want to go back to?
And not to date ourselves, that
Yeah.
game was a long time ago, and I don't think they play that anymore.
Yeah. We do it at the holidays just because it's still hysterical. I think
Okay.
half of us can't hear, or it's too loud of an environment, and then we just crack up. Or you always have that one person who's just gonna change it for you anyhow because they think it's funny.
That's fun. So once AI tools become a commodity available to everyone,
Mhm.
where does the durable competitive advantage go? Does it return to brand, proprietary data, or the speed of internal decision making?
Alright, so let's go back to so AI information, right? What if we go back to the printing press, right? The printing
Mm,
press, we managed to get information that was out there for everybody and not just the elite. And so I think that's the same thing too with AI. If everybody has that availability, who's going to drive that? So I think part of that is the brand. I mean, with the printing press, it was very much delivered. It was very much influenced by religious sects because they wanted to, make sure that the religious doctrine was being set out. And that, that's not a value judgment. That's just kind of from what I believe, from what I've researched to be fact. AI is going to be who is marketing it, who is going to do it. I think a lot of times we look at free platforms versus not free platforms and why they take so much momentum, right? So,
mhm,
if you look at schools, many schools will use Google because it's free and up to a certain level for almost everything. But once you get into, Apple or Microsoft, then you have to have different licensing agreements and that sort of thing. So I think it's about where we're putting the information. But I then think it has to be branded at some point because it's all the money and ideas have to come from someplace,
yeah.
right? And so, I think I love giving somebody something, give somebody a blank piece of paper, tell them to draw an eye and see what they create. Is it the letter I? Is it your eye? Is it whatever it is? And I think that, but all I gave them was this free piece of paper and a pencil or a pen or whatever it is that they wanted. So I do think, there's got to be that level of here's what it is. What can you create with it? And then the other part is, should everybody still have that same access? But we're still looking at people who don't even have access to the internet. And
Yeah.
so, it's fair and equitable the best that it can be, but there's still going to be that disparity. AI, if I don't have a cell phone, I'm not going to be able to use AI nearly as much as I would. Or do I have to go to the local library to get on a computer and use my AI there? So I
Hmm.
also think it's access as well.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. Now, specifically in healthcare, where
Mhm.
does the cost of human error is, oh, hold on, where the cost of error is human life? How do we transition from AI as a research assistant to AI as a clinical partner without eroding the patient provider relationship?
It's that trust. And so there are things that we're going to get wrong, both as if I'm the human doing it and if I'm looking at the data that is showing me something, right? So I can have somebody who maybe on paper it looks like everything's fine, but when they're sitting in front of me and I can see they're in a lot of pain or their vision is blurry or something, I might not know what that reason is based upon based upon the data that I've been given, based upon the tests that I ran.
Mm,
But and then I might have somebody who looks completely fine. And from my human judgment, well, they look fine, everything's gonna be fine. But then I'm gonna do, whatever the testing that we've run and be like, okay, internally, the things that we cannot see, this is important. So I think it's gotta be a combination between the two and also being okay, like, and here is here's your lab results. Typically, we would see this, this, and this with your lab results. However, the way you're behaving and your information that you're giving me isn't matching those. So then we ask those questions a little bit further. Okay, this would normally indicate that you might have pain in your left elbow. Do you have pain in your left elbow that you just didn't mention? So I think it's also too going back to that person to ask those questions, but mistakes will be made.
mhm.
And they have the humans override the available data or have the data override what the human can do. It's still human life, and we have so many things that can go wrong within a system. But is it gross negligence, or was it that the information didn't come out quick enough and that we weren't able to help, or we thought it was one thing and we didn't, which is why, when they do rounds in the morning or when they're meeting with a team to figure out what the best course of action is, those can't go away. We take all the data that we can, but the human judgment is still going to be there. And I think that's going to be really important. But mistakes will be made, but hopefully we learn something from that. Okay, we have seen, if you do have some sort of a fatal result, what did we learn from it? And which is why we do autopsies, which is why we go back to ask the questions to see what we missed so we don't have that same thing happen again.
Yeah. I've been watching Grey's Anatomy,
Hmm.
and it's like one of my favorite shows. And I believe like sometimes like when they're talking to each other, I wonder when they're writing their notes fictionally, when they're writing their notes, like how do they remember everything? So like
Hmm.
with the help of the note-taking AI, that was like pretending that that's in the
Yeah.
script,
Yeah.
like having the note-taking AI in it. Like, how fast what else other shenanigans would they put into like, what other
Right.
things would they get into, right?
Absolutely. Or, if because I look at this now where every once in a while I'll be using, I don't know, either doing text to speech with something, but it picks up the TV in the background too. And then you'll
Mhm,
see what it spits out. And you're like, no, I didn't say that at all. Or it picked up the radio or it did whatever. So, but that's the thing too, is I can just hit send and not look at it. Or I can go, all right, well, I didn't mean to say any of this and try to catch that mistake before it's made. But there
mhm,
is part of it. I mean, dictating into something. I like it because it types even faster for me than I can type. So, but there is plus you have to though is look back at what you meant to say versus what's there for two reasons. One, it's going to be that recall and that repetitiveness because if I just say it once, throw it into something, I don't have the muscle memory of writing it on a piece of paper.
mhm.
That's one thing I still like to write with pen and paper because I can remember things better than if I'm typing them on a computer or speaking into something. I can learn in all ways, but when I want something that's going to be enduring, that's why, I mean, even right now, I have a piece of paper and a pencil here. I haven't picked it up much, but that's how my thought process is because then I can at least recall where I saw it on the page.
Yeah,
So I do think it's interesting of how much we can recall, and if
mhm.
I can remember 2, 3, 7 sentences and repeat that back to you. I mean, I used to do that when I was acting and remember my dialogue, right? But I don't know. I mean, heck, you could memorize a whole play if you
Yeah.
were in there and heard it repetitive. But I do think that that is not something, I couldn't tell you what I had for dinner last night, let alone now remember all that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's why I was like, with the additional drama that they would have,
Yeah.
right? And
Uh-huh.
then talking to their patients and then talking to the other doctors and the
Yeah.
interns and all that stuff. Like, when do you write your notes?
That's what I find in my day-to-day life. Okay, so anytime we have an event at school, we have to do an incident report. So then it is, okay, maybe that incident happened, it took maybe, I don't know, however long, and then you have to write the report. And it wants to know who was involved, who was present, what were the details of the event, what time did it happen? And that does become difficult to be able to get that sense of accuracy. If you've had an event, especially when it comes to something that's a traumatic event, what
Hmm.
that does to your brain as well. How accurate can you be? And or sometimes we think we got everything right. And then what was that? What's the one that's the Mandela effect or something like that, where you think you saw something and then when you go
Yeah.
to look back at it, you're like, oh no, that was never true at all. So it's what our brains will also tell us, but we do the best we can with what we know. But the more that you have those interactions, that what's that door theory, that more doors, that's why we forget when we walk into a room, because
Yeah.
our brains reset. And like us on our phones, when we close windows and go to something else, our brains reset. There's a reason why we stand in a doorway going, what did I come in here for? And we're fragmenting our brains even more by, whatever it is. I've got how many different things going on here right now.
Yeah. I totally agree because, like, I walk into doors and I'm like, hold on,
Yeah.
why am I here?
Yeah.
What happened?
Yeah. But when you retrace your steps, a lot of times you will figure it out. Okay, I
Yeah.
just was over here. All right. Oh, I was just going to grab the laundry and put that.
Yeah. The brain is funny. So, if you've had a front row seat to how leadership is evolving, is
Mhm.
there a specific moment in your own career where you had to unlearn a traditional leadership habit to make room for a more adaptive, tech forward mindset?
I think in some aspect is having that relinquish of control,
Mm,
and letting others create, knowing that you're going to support. But I think, just sometimes really letting people, delegating what you can and letting people do their own thing or within a guideline. And then I think the part of it is just debriefing. So, what I've also found, and I think we do this with performance reviews, scheduling a time for feedback. So that way it's not that they think something went wrong or I need to talk to you in my office right away. It's like,
yeah.
okay, yeah, go ahead and try this. And then let's just plan on meeting tomorrow at like 1 and see how it went. So that way it takes away the shock of, whatever. But I do think that's something that I have learned is to close that feedback loop is all right, they've done it, but now let's discuss it to see if it worked because it's something that we want to repeat and share. Or is it
Hmm.
something like, no, let's tweak it before we do that. So I do
Yeah.
think it's relinquishing some control to let people try new things.
That's good that you do the closing loop because
Yes.
for me, I have anxiety in that realm where, if they're like, come to my office, I need to talk to you. I'm like,
Yeah.
why do you need to talk to me? What did I do?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
like it's just like, I know I didn't do anything wrong,
Right.
but okay, can
Yeah.
you tell me why you want to talk to me?
Yeah, and I do try to tell people that too. Hey, I'd like to meet with you to discuss this and this. If you got anything else you want to discuss, but I do. I think scheduling a time that works for both of you. Just to, I think it takes the anxiety out of it. It takes the fear out of
Yeah.
any of that. Like, oh no, we're going to talk regardless. So and then the way that I've been trained too is you always find that area for refinement and then that area for reinforcement. So
Hmm.
there's always a positive to come up with it. To come up with you're doing this well, but evaluating hundreds and hundreds of people throughout my years, there's still got to be an area of, maybe it's not improvement, maybe it's not a refinement, maybe it's a, hey, did you think about this? So I think sometimes that's what the conversation, how I frame it. What you did was great, but did you think about maybe this for some of the kids who might not have gotten it? Or did you think about doing this when you tried to, tell somebody else, whatever it is that you were trying to accomplish? So I do
Yeah.
think that those things and people want to improve, I think ultimately, but if they know going into it, there is going to be something I'm going to give them feedback on of something that either they can think of next or to do better. They know that's coming. So it's not that anxiety being, I've been a straight A student or I always got things right and I know she's going to pick on me. No, it's part
Hmm.
of the process. It is the evaluation process.
Yeah. That's good. So when you aren't advising boards on the future of governance, which is this is the last question, by the way.
Okay.
What is the one analog hobby or passion that keeps you grounded in a world that is digitizing at breakneck speed?
I love puzzles and games.
Ooh.
I one of my favorite things is there is almost always a puzzle going at my house or anything else. What I love about them is it allows you to still have like a social interaction with people because
Mhm.
you're not waiting for who's next turn, or you're not waiting for, we don't care the number of pieces you put in. It's not competitive. It's all sitting down, having a conversation, maybe even having snacks while working on a task. So puzzles are hands down one of my favorite things to do.
By the way,
Mhm.
I saw online where there's a 60,000 piece puzzle that has like the whole map of the world
Oh, wow.
and like little tidbits of what's going on in that area,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. And
Yeah.
I was thinking that I should get it because that's another thing for me. I also like puzzles
Right.
just like you. So I was like, oh, maybe grab. So it comes in 60 bags. So
Okay.
basically like 1,000 pieces per bag. And that would
Yeah.
be like a good, like once a week type
Yeah.
thing to do or whenever.
Yeah.
And then just do it and then make it a collage and put it on the
Right.
wall, like frame it and all that stuff. So I think that would be cool to do.
I always say I like to do puzzles that don't hurt my brain. Like I want to do them for pleasure and not
Mhm.
where, it's going to be like, oh, is this, I don't like it when puzzles are all caught with the same shape, but the colors are different. And so then you might have it in the wrong spot. But I love the ones that have like unique shapes and all of that. But yeah,
Yeah.
I do it just for that sheer enjoyment. It's relaxing.
Yeah, it is relaxing. I can concur on that. So right now, I think we have one that's 3,000 pieces that's
Yeah.
on the dining table that's
Yeah.
been sitting there for a little bit now, but hey,
And it doesn't, you don't have to teach it. You don't have to have like a skill set either. So, I
right.
can do it with my grandson or my parents. And, I work at a K through 12 school and the kindergartners will sit right next to the seniors whenever we have a few minutes and they'll work on them together. So it's just nice to have that low stakes, high engagement.
Mhm.
And we use it a lot to break the ice with things too. You're at least focusing on a different task and it allows me to be able to communicate. And nobody cares how quickly it gets done. It's not a race.
Yeah. Unless you're in a competition.
Yes, this is true. This is true.
Well, I thank you so much, Holly, for coming on. It was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you to the Wise crew for listening, and I will see you next time.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
It was a pleasure.
Bye.